Welcome to this presentation, Homeopathy for Traumatic Times. This is a very timely topic, which is why I am teaching it now, because there have been a series of different kinds of events lately that are upsetting to everyone, whether you are directly and personally involved or not. So I really wanted to bring forth some information, especially because homeopathy really is a very effective modality at times of disaster. Homeopathy actually became famous by Hahnemann's work during wars and epidemics, so it has quite a history, a 200-year history of being a really good emergency medicine. And so I think the more people who understand the possibilities of using homeopathy, the more we can all feel prepared for different things that are happening in our society and in the world today. On this short webinar, I'm also going to be discussing some adaptogenic herbs and talking about some possibilities for further study that are going to be coming up in 2018. So just a little bit about homeopathy, for those of you that may not be familiar with it. Homeopathy is really an energy medicine, so it has more in common with acupuncture and other energetic healing modalities than it does with regular allopathic medicine. Homeopathic remedies are dispensed often on little white pellets, so it's easy to take. But they are energized preparations, so they are free of side effects. And basically what a homeopathic remedy does is it supports what your vital force is already trying to do. For example, in an acute situation, let's say with a child who has an ear infection, when you give the homeopathic remedy, the fever may actually go up for a moment as the body is actually dealing with the infection with the way that it was designed to do, which can be through fever. So the fever may actually spike first, and then the child gets better and all the pain goes away and the child falls asleep. That's an example of an actual healing response, rather than an antipathic medicine which goes against what the body is trying to do, such as taking a Tylenol, which is made to reduce the fever and keep the fever from coming. So homeopathy basically supports a healing process, whether it's an acute injury or an ear infection or something more chronic problems like asthma, for example. Homeopathy always is basically supporting what we call the vital force, the body's ability to heal itself. And so it's gentle, it's safe, and it's effective. The first topic that we're going to talk about in terms of homeopathic remedies are emotional shock and trauma. Even if there isn't any physical damage, even just hearing about upsetting things in the news, for example, the recent shootings in Las Vegas, where it's very traumatic and stressful and shocking to hear about this just amazingly cruel and horrific event that happened recently. And these things happen all over the world in terms of wars, and bad things have happened all through history. So emotional shock and trauma is something that we deal with, whether it's just from listening to things on the news or because we have a strong personal connection with somebody that has suffered injury. The first remedy that we think of for emotional shock is aconite. We say, when in fright, take aconite. And aconite is that kind of sudden kind of feeling. For example, if suddenly we had a really major earthquake or having a motor vehicle accident and narrowly averting death, that intense fright where you feel like, oh my God, I could die right now. That's really the feeling of aconite. So as I said, when in fright, take aconite, especially when the fear comes on very, very fast. So often people who have been through motor vehicle accidents or earthquakes, or gone through a possible death, a situation where they could have died, they go into an aconite state. They may not only have a fear of dying, but may also have a presentiment of death, a feeling like they're about to die, predicting the time, saying, I really feel like I'm about to die. That sense of and terror of being about to die is really aconite. So, of course, people who've been through all kinds of violence and wars, this can be very helpful. Post-traumatic stress disorder, flashbacks and anxiety attacks, because sometimes these powerful frights, they can actually stay with you for a long, long time, and homeopathy can actually help with emotional healing. I've seen this many times where homeopathy has helped. For example, in birth trauma, children who are born and have trouble breathing right in the beginning, and then age 5 and 6, they're still having symptoms of fright, but we can trace it back to the fact that they had a very traumatic birth, and you give the aconite and their behavior completely changes. I've seen this, so it can be very powerful even years later. Some other symptoms associated with aconite include heart palpitations, heat in the chest, and basically, life-threatening situations. Heart attacks and stroke are sometimes treated with aconite as well. So it's a very powerful medicine. It's probably something you may already be familiar with. In this presentation, I'm trying to mix in some of the more common remedies and some of the less common remedies so that there's something for everyone here. So for some of you, this is just a little reminder, but it's an important remedy to have around. Ignatia is our other important shock remedy. Ignatia has to do with acute grief. So the sudden loss of a loved one and that spasmodic situation that comes up with sudden grief of a lump in the throat, sighing, spasms, trying to hold back tears, but then sobbing spasmodically. A person who needs Ignatia and has suffered grief might seem very sort of emotionally defensive and touchy. And there may be spasms in other parts of the body, such as in the back. So often, when when you lose a family member or any other kind of sudden loss of a pet, loss of a family member, sometimes it can even be something that seems more mundane, such as getting fired from your job or something like that. But any kind of loss that feels like a grief, often Ignatia will help quite a bit with. So now I'm going to go more into remedies for fright and anxiety. What is fright, actually? I looked it up for this presentation, and it's a feeling induced by a perceived danger or threat. So when our life or our loved ones or our comforts or our home, something that's important to us, feels threatened or in danger or like it could be taken away from us, that's what fright is. And some of the behaviors that are associated with fright include fleeing, hiding, and freezing. Freezing meaning, not moving, almost like paralysis. And I'm going to talk about how some of these remedies connect with these behaviors that are associated with fright. Anxiety, on the other hand, has more to do with threats that are perceived as uncontrollable or unavoidable. So once things set in and it just seems like they're not going to be able to change, acute fright can turn into anxiety because of that threat feeling like it's always there. One of our most important remedies for fright, it's not something you can necessarily get easily at a health food store, but I use it a lot, is Stamonium. Basically, Stamonium is very helpful in fright that has an element of violence, either extreme fear after witnessing violence, or even people who become violent themselves out of fear. So it can go both ways, fearful violence or violent fears. There are often a lot of fears associated. People who need Stamonium are often diagnosed as having a lot of different kinds of phobias, including the dark is a big one, being alone in the dark, fear of water, fear of ghosts and demons and unseen kinds of beings, and also phobias such as claustrophobia, fear in a narrow place, or agoraphobia, fear of leaving the house. So intense fears and phobias that are brought on after witnessing violence or becoming very, very afraid. So people can go into this state, again, after narrowly averting death. We talked about that with Aconite, but also Stamonium when it continues more, such as in a flood, earthquake, or other kinds of disasters. People who need Stamonium often have nightmares and very vivid dream life that is disturbing to them because it's so vivid. And night terrors, especially in children. A night terror is when a child wakes up and doesn't recognize anybody and is just screaming like he's, in another world and seeing very scary things. So people who need Stamonium sometimes stammer quite a bit and may exhibit superhuman strength in a kind of manic state. So this is when, the kind of dark side, if you're looking at it from a sort of Jungian psychological perspective, sort of when the dark side is arising due to some kind of violence that has been in the environment. Stamonium is one of the remedies. There are others, but Stamonium is one of the remedies that can be very helpful in this kind of fright. So this kind of fright, in terms of what we were talking about before, has more to do with fleeing and hiding. On the other hand, opium is a remedy which can be used in even more profound kinds of fright, the kind of fright that you're completely immobilized, paralyzed, either physically or emotionally or both. So being numbed out or checked out from fright. So this is kind of some of the worst kinds of fright that are imaginable. And it's a different kind of reaction. Instead of the kind of intensity of Stamonium, there can be a very dreamy, drowsy, numbed out state, but there can also be this other intense hurry and nervous state, so they can alternate back and forth. People who need opium sometimes experience things that are usually painful as painless because they're physically numbed out as well. And it's useful in near-death situations where people are in a coma and already have the Cheyne-Stokes respiration, which comes at end of life. So opium can be very, very helpful in those situations. It's not something you can easily get as a homeopathic in the US, but you can actually order it from pharmacies like in the UK, and you can ask me about that later if you want to know more about that. We may also, we do plan to put together a kit for people. We're going to be offering a course that goes into a lot more detail, into more remedies and more information, and we're developing that for 2018, and so that kit will have these kinds of remedies in it that are harder to get. So the whole system basically with opium shuts down, and some other symptoms of the system shutting down and being paralyzed include constipation or diarrhea, retention of urine, or bedwetting, involuntary urination. So it can kind of go both ways, where everything just sort of shuts down and isn't working well with opium, and it can be as I said, based on the most severe kinds of fright. Arsenicum is a remedy that's known well for anxiety, and the feeling behind arsenicum is really that the world is just become chaotic and become out of control. And then there's this desire and wish to get the world under control, and so an obsession with order and tidiness, and can develop, you know, into OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, of everything having to be in its right place. There can be a lot of restlessness with arsenicum, moving around, not being able to stay in one place, a lot of anxiety that comes up at midnight, wanting reassurance from others, not necessarily on, not so much, you know, emotional coddling, but just the reassurance of somebody being around who's going to be able to help, you know, if something goes wrong. So arsenicum, people who need arsenicum can also go into incredible states of physical exhaustion, but then become very, very restless. So all of these are signs of, you know, anxiety that about the kind of crazy place the world is becoming, and is a common remedy in also diarrhea for travelers, of all things. So it's a very important remedy, I think, during this time. And if you do any traveling, it can really help with the kinds of issues that come up physically as well. It's a huge remedy with a lot more to it, but right now I'm just focusing on acute anxiety states with arsenicum. So now I'm going to move on to some remedies for physical trauma. This has to do with mostly soft tissue injuries that can happen during disasters. And the first remedy that I'm going to talk about has had a lot of research done on it, and can be, you probably already know about it. So this is Arnica montana. And it's the first remedy we think of for soft tissue injuries, including surgery, which is a soft tissue injury. And it helps the blood be reabsorbed if there is bleeding. That's really its best use. So if there's been a bruise or some kind of injury where the blood vessels or the capillaries have been damaged and there's some bruising, then Arnica can really help with that. It's also a great remedy in emotional or physical trauma. The way I see Arnica is it really helps you kind of ground and come back into your body after a traumatic experience. One of the symptoms of Arnica is saying there's nothing wrong, sending the doctor home. So it's that feeling like you get, let's say you get a blow to your head and you say, no, 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 I'm fine, I'm fine. And people can see that there's, you know, some blood coming down, or there's really something wrong with you and you're not fine. But when you're in this shocked Arnica state, you think you're fine, even though you're not. So that is actually a sign. If somebody, you know, if somebody gets an injury and looks obviously injured and then tells you, no, 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 I'm fine, just realize that might be part of the Arnica state. And if you have some Arnica in your purse, give it to them. It's a great first aid remedy, often the first thing that's given in stroke. You can get it in capsules. It's being marketed almost like an allopathic medicine now, where you can buy it in capsules, and allopathic doctors are giving it to their patients for pre-surgery. There's like a whole protocol for it, because it does reduce swelling and bruising. So it's a great thing to take before surgery. Natrum sulphuricum is an incredibly good remedy for head injury. There are many remedies for head injury, and in our more detailed course we'll go into other ones. But natrum sulphuricum is the best known and the most frequently given. So often if somebody does get a head injury, giving Arnica first is a good idea, but natrum sulph might be a good follow-up remedy, especially if the person is suffering from any continued symptoms such as headaches, memory loss, sadness and irritability, suicidal feelings, sensitivity to light, even seizures. All of these are symptoms that can develop after a concussion, after a head injury, and these are all symptoms that Natrum sulphuricum can clear up, and I've seen it do it even years after the original injury. So it's a very important remedy to keep in mind, and of course the sooner you can give it the better, but even if the injury had happened years ago, you may still be able to help with this remedy, if it's the right remedy and is what is indicated. And finally, in terms of physical trauma remedies, Ruta. Ruta graveolens. A lot of people are more familiar with Rustox, which is another remedy for kind of sprains and strains, but Ruta often works wonders, even when Rustox is not working, because it has a slightly different way of working, a slightly different remedy picture. So one of the things we teach, of course, is how to differentiate between these different remedies. This Ruta graveolens is actually the plant rue. It's an herb that's been grown for centuries as a medicinal plant, and contains a lot of interesting compounds. Its main use in terms of first aid is for injury to the connective tissue, tendons, and the periosteum. So the symptoms of this are basically stiffness and bruising. So having some issue with your joints where it feels very bruised and stiff and sore and achy. So depending on where the injury is, you might, of course, only feel it in the place of the injury, but it can also be a good remedy when it's going all through your body, like a kind of arthritic reaction. It's also a very good remedy in eye strain. So that's another use of it when you've been on the computer too much and strained your eyes. Ruta is one of the remedies to consider. So how do you take a homeopathic remedy? Well, you can get homeopathic remedies in a lot of health food stores and Whole Foods. You can get them online as well. What's showing here is a boron tube, which is what is easiest to get for most people. It's what's available. And you can get remedies in different potencies. The potency that you might consider for some of these more serious conditions is a 30C. So if you can get these remedies in a 30C potency and take 3 to 5 pellets 1 or 2 times during a day, and then just see after a few doses if you're getting some improvement. You don't want to repeat a homeopathic remedy that isn't helping you, because you don't want to cause what's called a proving by taking a remedy that you don't need. So I would just suggest trying 1 or 2 doses of a 30C if any of these remedies sound like something you need on an acute level. If it's on a chronic level, you really, in other words, if it's something that's been going on for a long time, it's not a new symptom over the last few days because of some kind of traumatic event that has happened. But if it's a more chronic thing, something that happened decades ago, those are much more complicated cases, and you really should have your case taken by a homeopath. So I'm suggesting please use this information wisely that I'm giving. It's really for acute conditions. And one of the things that we do in our program is show you very carefully what is the difference between an acute and a chronic condition, and what you should treat acutely and what you should not treat acutely. So I'm just giving a very brief explanation right now to give you an idea how you might use this information. Now I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about adaptogenic, a few herbs. This is not homeopathy. This is actual herbs and herbal teas. I've done some other YouTube presentations and talked about some different ones. I try to do it a little differently for this one based on the subject matter here. But I do have a strong trust in herbs and plants for being able to heal us and support us in difficult times, and that's what adaptogenic herbs are for. Definition of adaptogenic is the stabilization of physiological processes in the body. So in other words, making all your organ systems stable, and all of the different kinds of physiological processes going on in your body, stabilizing them, and also the promotion of homeostasis, which kind of means the same thing, bringing everything back into balance. So when we are under physical or emotional stress, we get out of whack. And what these herbs can do is, if we take them on a regular basis, they can really support our body and our mind as well to come into a better state of balance. I have kind of more trust in these kinds of substances than artificial vitamins. Many of these adaptogenic herbs are actually very high in vitamins and minerals and antioxidants, so that's one of the ways they work. And I think that the more natural combinations of phytochemicals that are in plants is much better than taking artificially made vitamins. A lot of the information on adaptogenic herbs was actually based on research done in the Soviet Union, Korea, and China before the 1980s. So these were being explored in those parts of the world a long time ago. And some of them are also, you'll see I'm only discussing two this time, but one of them is a Chinese herb that's used quite a bit. So having a decreased sensitivity to stress and having support for your system is why I really encourage the use of these kinds of herbs. First one I want to talk about is hibiscus. I've been really enjoying hibiscus lately on a daily basis. I'm having some hibiscus tea right now. It's very easy to get, and it's high in vitamin C. It's got a great kind of sour red flavor, but it also has these incredible effects on your system. It lowers blood sugar and lowers blood pressure. Both of those tend to go up when we are stressed. Our blood sugar goes up because we go into flight or fight. So our blood sugar goes up and our blood pressure goes up. So it has an incredible, it can lower blood pressure. If you drink about 3 cups a day, it can lower blood pressure by about 10 points. And I've had this experience myself. It's amazing. Within a few days, my blood pressure had gone down, and studies have shown that it has this effect. It helps with obesity and fatty liver. It may also reduce the formation of kidney stones, and it supports the immune system. So it's very easy to drink. It's got a good flavor. I put stevia in mine. Actually, I drink mine with nettles because I'm taking nettles for the mineral content. So I have nettle hibiscus tea every afternoon, and I make it quite strong. And it's having, it's really a wonderful drink. It's easy to get. Of course, it's best to get organic when you can. And also, I would suggest getting bulk herbs. They're much more reasonably priced than buying little tea bags. So you can actually go to websites such as, is it Mountain Rose? I think that's one of the places I get them. Sometimes I've even ordered them on Amazon. But you can go to herbal stores and get like a pound of it and make your own tea. So I suggest doing it that way rather than little tea bags get very expensive. They charge you a lot for the box and the paper and all of that. You don't need all that stuff if you're going to be really drinking a lot of these adaptogenic herbs. So hibiscus, I didn't see on any official list as an adaptogen, but by definition, by what it does, how it helps the body go back into homeostasis, I definitely consider it an adaptogen. Schisandra is another very interesting herb, another red herb. You can see these little berries here. It's got 5 flavors, and they really are very interesting. They're just these little dried red berries, and they have all 5 flavors in them. So sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and pungent, I guess, are the five. And what you can do is just, take about a teaspoon of the berries and put them in some hot water. I tend to infuse them a few times. I'll let that infuse. I'll drink it, and then I'll pour some more water on. You can even eat the berries if you want. You don't want to boil them, but you can infuse them in hot water. So they are anti-inflammatory. They protect against cancer. They support the heart. They're used all over Chinese medicine for everything from sleep formulas to immune boosting formulas. They address chronic cough. It's just almost like a medicine chest in a berry. This is more, whereas hibiscus is more of a food grade herb, Schisandra is actually a medicinal herb. It's quite strong. So, you want to start slowly and just take a little bit, but it can be used on a regular basis and is a very powerful medicine. So nutrition tips for challenging times. Again, this is a subject that we're going to go into a lot more detail in our expanded course in 2018. But just to give you some ideas, sugar in your body puts you into flight or fight, which is the definition of stress. When your blood sugar is raised, anxiety is going to go up. One nutritionist teacher that I had said, mood follows blood sugar. So what your goal is to have a steady blood sugar, and simple carbohydrates such as white flour, sugar, potatoes, simple starches, put your body into flight or fight response because it spikes your blood sugar. The foods that are going to keep your blood sugar steady include healthy fats and oils because they have no effect at all on blood sugar. They're metabolized in a different way in your body. They give you energy. Foods such as coconut oil has medium chain fatty acids that give you energy, but without the sugar boost. So coconut oil, avocados, olive oil, if it's not heated too much. There's a lot, we can talk about here. You may be familiar with this information already. Fermented foods are very good for your digestion, and digestion is one thing that goes off with stress. Because when the body starts shutting down the less important systems or sending less energy there, so that's where people get constipated or diarrhea when they're anxious. So eating fermented foods that give you the enzymes that your body needs to digest foods and the probiotics especially. So all traditional cultures have fermented foods as condiments in their diet, and bringing these back into your diet is a way to also save money because instead of taking probiotic pills, you can have a few tablespoons of sauerkraut, and that can work just as well or probably better. Another tip is to eat some protein or fat combinations such as nuts or cheese or eggs. If you're feeling stressed, to kind of keep your energy balanced and protect your adrenal glands from going into low blood sugar, high blood sugar, and getting more stressed out. So just a change of topic here, as I was preparing this information, I started thinking about other traumatic times in history, the recent ones, such as in Britain in 1939, when during World War II, when Hitler was threatening to start bombing the UK. One of the responses of the government in Britain was to put up these posters: "Your courage, your cheerfulness, your resolution will bring us victory." This is one of the original posters. So they were trying to encourage people to really be resourceful and resilient inside themselves, and try to help people summon up their inner strength. I don't know how effective it was, but I do know that the British people really just did stand up and face their very terrifying situation with a whole lot of courage and service. And so it's kind of good to remember that. I mean, there are many, many other examples, but that's one. But interestingly, what I found was that after they put out that poster, there was some criticism of it, the use of your courage, your this. So they changed it to this one, which is actually quite well known now, but it was never put out. I guess the war, they got too busy with the actual war, but they came up with this other slogan, keep calm and carry on. So, and now this has become a kind of popular one. It was rediscovered in a bookstore in the year 2000 in a bookstore in the UK. And so keep calm and carry on became sort of a little bit of a phrase in the UK and a little bit in the US. So I think it's good advice. And one of the things we want to do with this short webinar, but also with our longer course that we're developing, is to kind of give you tools to keep calm and carry on in different kinds of situations. One more modality that we are going to get into in the longer course is working with our mind training. And this is something that we don't have anymore in our culture. In the old days, maybe a generation ago, people maybe went to church more, were more involved with a prayer life or a religious life or a spiritual life that provided some kind of spiritual or religious stability in their lives. But a lot of people are lacking this now. And even on just a mind level, not talking about belief in any particular religion, in the East, there is a tradition of mind training, a tradition of learning how to look at one's mind and to meditate and to understand the flow of emotions in a way to reduce anxiety and to let go of fear. And there are very specific techniques and ways of training the mind to be able to do this. So I feel like this is very crucial information that would be very helpful to everyone, to all of us. We all kind of need to practice this, because when we're overcome by fear, it's very difficult to think properly, or to feel, obviously, feeling very, very unsafe and feeling anxious. But you can actually, through these techniques, increase compassion, increase your care for others, and at the same time increase courage and have fear kind of go away. So these are very profound techniques, and I feel like they should be brought forward these days so that we can all understand our own minds better and learn how to work with fear and transform that fear into compassion and kindness and service for others. So that's really my goal with this part of the course that will be coming up. It's more detail than I can go into right now, but we will be teaching more on this simple meditative techniques and mind trainings for letting go of fear and for developing compassion. So starting in January 2018, we're developing a new course, which we're tentatively calling Wellness in Troubling Times, Homeopathy in Holistic Ways to Self-Reliance. So this course will really include homeopathy, including the entire acute case-taking process taught in detail. We'll also teach acute case analysis and how to differentiate between different remedies and how to choose the right homeopathic potency for your case. We'll go into the materia medica of between 35 and 50 of the most important remedies for our time and what we're facing now, and the kinds of things that you and your family and friends might need. We will teach you how to use the homeopathic repertory, which is an index of symptoms, which is very helpful in choosing remedies. And we'll also be going into some adaptogenic herbs and nutrition topics, so to get that kind of support through herbs and through nutrition, and teaching mind training and meditation. So it's going to be quite a comprehensive course. For those of you that are familiar with our program, it will be kind of similar to Module 1, but it won't have the organon studies in it. We're going to be focused on really the practical hands-on use of homeopathy and other tools to keep everybody supported during these times. So thank you very much for joining me, and feel free to contact us or take a look at our website at www.homeopathytraining.org, or you can contact me, Willa Kaiser. You can see my name right there. How it's spelled is willakaiser@gmail.com is how you can contact me if you have any questions. Thank you very much.